Alright folks, welcome to week 9. So this week we're going to be talking about incorporating sources, and we're going to be talking about citation. Now this is going to be something important going forward, especially considering what we're doing next. Our next big project is going to be the annotated bibliography. So you're going to need to know how to handle MLA format when it comes to doing your annotated bibliography and doing citations going forward. So, the main thing that you want to use citation for is to integrate research. Okay? Once the writing process starts in earnest on the first draft, it becomes important to decide how research information is utilized. Okay? How is it going to impact your work? What are you going to use your research for? For what purpose? Now, there's some elements that are going to influence how you use your research. Okay, one is if you're using it for informational use. That is, say you're integrating data and information without a stance. Okay, this is the purest form of research, where you're basically looking for information for the sake of having the information. The other possibility here is persuasive use, where you are using the information to agree with the writer's stance, or information that contradicts the opponent. Okay. So persuasive use research is going to be mostly what you use for argument's sake. It's going to be how you're going to justify your argument. Ultimately, it will be your own argument which dictates how research information will be used in your final product. And when you go to use that information, that's when you're going to need to use citation. Okay? It's also going to be how you're going to be integrating with different forms of integration. Each manner of integrating information from a research source has its own time and place in your work. However, regardless of which you use, the source must be cited. Okay? There's 3 primary ways of integrating information from a research source, and that would be summary, paraphrase, and quotation. When you're using summary, you're condensing the argument by keeping the main ideas intact. So, what do you do this for? You use it when the source's whole argument is relevant, okay? As opposed to when you're looking at individual parts of an argument that you may be able to use. If you're using summary, you're looking at the entire thing, and therefore you're saying that this person's entire argument is useful. It works for the purposes of my research. Okay. Use it when your source's view is an alternative or opposite one to yours. Okay, so if you're trying to figure out what your source is saying, one of the best ways to do it is to try to find the main points and create a summary of that source's work, so that you can get a better idea in a nutshell what they're trying to say. You also want to use it when the source's argument supports yours. Okay, that kind of goes without saying. You want to use sources that support your argument. Okay, especially if they're argumentative sources. Okay. If you're using paraphrase, what you're doing is reproducing an idea from a source, but translating the information into your own words. Okay. You're doing this primarily when you want to incorporate factual information or one specific idea from a source. If you're looking for a very specific and very limited piece of information, it'd be a good idea to try to paraphrase it. Okay? Here's the hard part, though. When you're doing a paraphrase, you have to try to do it in your own style. Okay? So one other reason you want to use paraphrase is when the source passage is too complex or technical in order to quote it. Okay, if it's something that is going to require some base knowledge that your audience does not have, then you're going to want to use a paraphrase to try to give a more clear idea to that audience what it is you're trying to say. You also want to use it when you want to integrate a source's information without breaking the flow of your writing. Okay, that is to say, by using your own language to integrate what they have to say. Okay. That's the important thing about paraphrasing, is that it has to sound like you're the one who said it. has to sound like your words. Okay? Then you have short quotations. Work brief quotes from the source smoothly into the grammar of your own sentences. Okay? So this is going to be when you find a piece of information and the author who supplies it to you puts it in such a way that you feel, okay, there's no way I can top this. It's going to be best expressed if I just present it as is. Okay? One thing you can use a short quote for is if you need a testimony from an authority. Okay? If you're using their words to say what you're trying to prove, that's going to be all the better for you, because they're going to be the one who is in a position to be an expert. They're going to be the one who's in a position to know the subject. You also want to use it when you want to reproduce a source's voice in a summary. Okay? If you want to show the way they said it, if there's a certain thing about the tone that they used when they presented that information. Okay? And the third part is what we were just talking about. Use it when the source language is memorable. If it's stated in a way that is really impactful, then you might want to consider using a quote. Okay, the fourth one here is using long quotation. When you're using long quotation, you're creating a block quote offset from the rest of the text to show that it is a quotation. Okay. There's two primary times you'd want to use this. You want to try to avoid using this very often, okay, because it does break up the flow in a huge way. You're basically creating a mini paragraph for your quotation. But two primary ways you want to use a block quote. Use it when you intend to analyze or criticize a quotation. So in which case you follow the quotation with your analysis. Talk about what you think the author is saying within that block quote. Okay? And you can also use it when the flavor and language of testimony is important. If there is a long passage that you need to quote because you need how it was said, then you want to use a block quote for it. And just so you're well aware, the rule of thumb for using a block quote is if it's going to be longer than 3 lines when you type it out. Okay? If it's longer than 3 lines, then you want to use a block quote. All right, so let's talk about writing these. Okay? Let's start with writing a summary. As concise, it should be as concise as possible to prevent distraction from your own argument. Okay? These summaries can be as short as a sentence. So, for example, in the textbook on my page 233, this is going to be in chapter 7. Okay? Particular chapter is working with ideas and information. If you need the title for it, if you're working with the mind tap text. Okay? So there, here's the passage. It's within the first passage in summarizing and paraphrasing. Here's a passage from an article in which a law professor offers an analysis of the so-called War on Poverty initiated by President Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s. Okay? So the first passage here is what the law professor stated. The commitment and symbolism of the war on poverty and the energy and enthusiasm of those who fought it were vital. For a brief period, the idea of conducting a war on poverty captured the nation's imagination. The phrase is surely one of the most evocative in our history. Yet the war's specific components were a tiny fraction even of the Great Society programs enacted between 1964 and 1968 during the administration of Lyndon Johnson, let alone those enacted during the New Deal and those added since, many during the presidency of Richard Nixon. And, even considering all these, we never fought an all-out war on poverty. Okay, so it's a very well thought out passage that Edelman writes here. Okay, here's a couple ways that you could summarize it. One of them would be a very short summary, as short as a sentence. Okay, here is the 1-sentence summary of that entire passage. According to Edelman, the war on poverty captured the nation's imagination. The author goes on to state that there's more to it than that. Okay, so that summary is actually a little too surface level. Okay, it's making too many inferences because captured the imagination was not a phrase that was even used in the original passage. Okay? So, here's a better summary of that passage. Edelman argues that although the idea of a war on poverty captured the country's imagination, programs focused on addressing poverty never amounted to more than a small part of President Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs and the social programs of other administrations. That's a bit more fair of a summary. Okay, in that case, what you're saying in the passage is, yeah, Johnson wanted to commit to a war on poverty. He enacted some programs. They were not quite as much as what had done before, and they weren't quite as much as what was done afterward. Okay, which is kind of what the passage is saying. All right, so the summary represents the source passage as a whole rather than focusing on one part of it. That's the key here. When you're summarizing, you have to try to represent the full breadth of the work that you are summarizing. Okay? So, that gets us to paraphrasing. There is a right and a wrong way to do this, and you have to be very careful, because if you paraphrase it the wrong way, it's going to amount to plagiarism. Okay? So, rewrite the passage in your own words using your own style. That's how you paraphrase. Avoid any wordings that sound too similar or exactly like the original source. Okay? There is a practice that's used by people when they paraphrase sometimes. It's something that you want to avoid, called patch writing, where what you're doing is slipping in unchanged passages from the original. Okay? You're not altering them in any way. You're not making them sound like you. You're just dropping them in there at random because you can't think of a way to word it. Okay? Technically, this is plagiarism. We do not want to be committing patch writing. Okay? One good bit of advice here is try writing the paraphrase twice to avoid patch writing and fully integrate the information into your own voice. For example, we have a couple of paraphrases of that Peter Edelman passage we gave you a couple minutes ago. Okay? So, here is the first paraphrase. Okay? And we'll kind of get into why this is problematic. The commitment and symbolism of the war on poverty were important. For a short time, the idea of a war on poverty captured the nation's imagination. But the specific components of the war were a tiny fraction of government programs enacted during the administration of Lyndon Johnson, not to mention those enacted before then and those added since. Even considering all these programs, an all-out war on poverty was never really fought. Okay? Sounds good on the surface, right? The problem is that it's using too many of Edelman's own words without really crediting them. Okay? Without making them into quotes. Okay? So, I'll call to mind the passage. That's the passage in that Edelman gives. Okay? If you need to back up the video to read it again, go ahead. But here is the phrases that this paraphrase uses that are directly lifted from Edelman. The commitment and symbolism of the war on poverty. The idea of a war on poverty captured the nation's imagination. The specific components, a tiny fraction, enacted during the administration of Lyndon Johnson. Even considering all these, an all-out war on poverty. Those are all phrases that were directly lifted from the Edelman passage, which makes this a plagiarized paraphrase. Okay? Compare that to the next paraphrase that Jagielski gives us, which is a little bit better, because now this time the writer is actually using their own phrasing to try to express what Edelman's saying. Okay? So take a listen to this. This is a approved paraphrase. According to Edelman, the idea of a war on poverty was important for its symbolism as well as for the national commitment it reflected. But although this idea resonated with Americans for a time, the programs intended specifically to fight poverty were never more than a small part of total government social programs, whether those programs were part of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, the earlier New Deal, or initiatives undertaken by Richard Nixon and subsequent presidents. As a result, Edelman states a total war on poverty was never really fought. Okay? So, it's still borrowing the phrase war on poverty, but that's also because that's a phrase that comes from history. So, that one's kind of unavoidable. However, the rest of it is being changed into the writer's own voice, into their diction, into their syntax. Okay. And let's talk about quoting now. Okay. There are several accepted grammatical techniques for quoting. Okay. One of them is to include a signal tag to show who is being quoted. This is when you're quoting complete sentences, by the way. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so include a signal tag to show who is being quoted. Okay, something like so-and-so stated, and then give the quote. Or so-and-so states, so-and-so claims, so-and-so says. Okay, that's a signal tag. That tells you that do you have a quote upcoming, and that'll allow you to show who is attributed to that quote. Okay. Next one, cite the page number if possible after the quote in parentheses. Okay, this is the only time. Okay, now that actually ties into the next part. Citation goes outside of the end quote, and the end punctuation of the sentence goes after the citation. All right, so this is the only time, and I repeat, it is the only time that it is acceptable to place the end punctuation from a quote outside of quotation marks. Normally that's a grammatical error, but if you have a citation, the citation and the end punctuation go outside of quotation marks. Okay. So when you're quoting complete sentences, that's what you want to do. Okay. When you're quoting specific words or phrases, insert the words or phrases into the sentence using proper grammatical rules. Do not separate the quote with commas. Okay. Commas are only reserved if you are separating a signal tag from a quote, or if the quote that you're going to present is going to amount to a complete sentence. Okay, if you're only quoting one or two words or a partial phrase, then you do not need commas. Okay. And as far as citation, cite the page number at the end of the sentence containing the quotes. Okay, don't cite it right after the quotes in this case. If it's just like a word or a phrase or something like that, wait till the end of the sentence to put in your citation. Okay. Then we have modifying a quotation. This is necessary when the quote by itself does not fit the flow of your writing. Okay. If there is a tense issue, for instance, a verb tense issue, you may want to alter the quote slightly. You have to, if you're going to do that, you have to insert the changes in brackets. Okay. So it should be the square bracket punctuation that you have on the keyboard. The two keys directly to the right of P. Okay. Now again, this is usually for clarifying pronouns. It's also used for clarifying verb tenses. Okay. So if you need to clarify who a pronoun is referring to, okay, if you need to insert a proper noun in place of a pronoun, you want to use the brackets. If you need to change a verb tense from present to past or vice versa, then you need brackets. Okay. All right. There's also a technique if you are omitting something from a quoted passage. Okay. Maybe the passage is way too long and you only want parts that are at the beginning and at the end. Okay. In which case you want to use an ellipsis to indicate information omitted. Okay. Now, this is where you hit a gray area in grammar, because you can either just insert an ellipsis by itself, which is the 3 periods, or you can do an ellipsis in brackets. More modern works will put the ellipsis in brackets just to show that they have altered the quote. Okay. Then we have quotes containing quotes. You want to use standard quotation marks for the main quotation, followed by single mark quotation marks for the quote within a quote. Okay. But one thing to keep in mind, though, is if you at any point find yourself quoting something that is British or written in what I call continental English or possibly Oxford English, okay, and it contains self-contained quotes, okay, continental and Oxford English reverses the order of quotation marks. So normally the main quotation mark you use is the 2 quotes followed by the 1 quote. In continental English, it's the other way around. Single quote for main quotes, double quotes for quote within a quote. Okay. And then we have a technique for block quotes. Okay. You use this for quotes, again, that will take up 4 or more lines in your own essay. Okay, so when you type them out, it's longer than 4 lines or longer. Okay, longer than 3 lines. Okay, you don't want any longer than that. You want to indent the block quote on tab space further than 1 tab space further than your regular paragraphs. Okay, so if you're hitting tab once to start a paragraph, to do a block quote, each line of it should be tab spaced in twice. Okay. Now, another thing, some textbooks show using an indent on the first line. Most block quotes do not indent the first line further than the rest of the quote. Okay. Your regular paragraphs will indent the first line 1 tab space, but if you're going with a block quote, typically all the lines are indented 2 tabs. Okay, that just designates it as a block quote. So let's talk about attributing sources. Okay, you want to use attributive tags to show sources of research information. Now, this is easier to do with quotations than with other forms of research integration. Okay, because typically you've got the quote right there. It's easier for you to figure out, okay, this is what I have to cite. Okay, you use the signal phrases to attribute who information comes from. So and so says. Okay, so and so claims. So and so believes. Okay, signal phrases like that will give an indication of who that information is attributed to. Okay, the author's name can be included in parenthetical citations if you need to, though. That is an MLA standard. Okay, you want to use attributive tags to show where source material begins and ends. Okay, so you want to signal as often as necessary, sometimes as often as the start of each sentence integrating research information. So every time you're presenting research information, you have to have a signal somewhere that it's coming from a source. Okay, whether it is something within the text or whether it is a citation. Okay, whether it's a parenthetical citation, some way or another you have to cite it. Okay, one way or another you have to attribute it. Use attributive tags to frame the source material in a rhetorical sense. So it shows evaluation of the source to enhance the reader's critical reading. Okay, that's where you could use verbs such as believes or claims. Okay, if it's not something that is absolute fact, if it's something that they're trying to assert, okay, then you want to use something that is not just he says this. Okay. Or he mentions this. Okay, that's usually saved for base facts. If it's something that could be disputed, use something like claims, believes, sometimes even cites. Okay, use verbs like that in your attribution. All right, so let's talk about avoiding plagiarism and academic fraud. Okay. Now, plagiarism is a pertinent problem not only in academia but in the professional world as well. Now, it is up to you to be vigilant and prevent yourself from falling into the traps. Okay. Now, to give you an idea of how severe a problem plagiarism can be, especially if you do it in the professional world, let me reference you to a story that dates back all the way to when I was a senior in undergrad. Okay. This story is about a high schooler in New Jersey by the name of Kavya Viswanathan. Okay, Ms. Viswanathan was a high school senior in 2008, I believe it was. Okay, I'm pretty sure it's 2008. Okay, she was a high school senior, already accepted to Harvard. She was also unique in that she had a publishing deal. Okay, she had earned a publishing deal based on a series based on her first published novel, which was called How Opal Meta Got Kissed, Got Wild, and Got a Life. Okay, it was a young adult title about an Indian American girl who was applying to Harvard, and Harvard was only giving her a provisional acceptance because she'd done nothing but study in high school, and her the admissions officer said you need to experience more of life. Okay, so part of the story is that Opal Meta composes this list of things that she can do to actually get a life. Okay, Made a big splash when it was first published. There were a lot of glowing reviews of it. Made the New York Times bestseller list. Okay, a lot of reviewers were saying that they loved the fact that it was a young adult author who was actually a young adult. Okay, she got a movie deal out of it, a six-figure movie deal. They were going to make a movie out of Opal Meta. Now, again, this was 2008. That was 12 years ago. You might be wondering why you've never heard of this. Okay, there's a good reason why. About a month after it was published, it started coming out that prominent young adult authors had found that they had found their passages wholesale lifted from their works and written into Opal Meta. Okay, this included one particular author who found, I believe it was 35 instances of passages that were lifted from two of her books. These ones you can look up. The books were titled Sloppy Firsts was one of the titles, and I don't remember what the second one was. Okay, so then it came out that a number of other authors noticed that Viswanathan had also plagiarized them for passages from Opal Meta. It turned out that Opal Meta had very little original content to it. Okay. As a result, publisher wound up having to recall the book. Okay, now you can still find copies of it on eBay. Okay, but they are copies that were listed as destroyed. Okay, so copy of Viswanathan wound up. There was a call for copy of Viswanathan's admission to Harvard to be rescinded because of the scandal. Ultimately, she did wind up attending Harvard. She graduated from Harvard Law. Okay, she's kind of lived now in obscurity, mainly because she got so infamous over this particular scandal. Okay, so just keep in mind this is a way you have possible real world repercussions from plagiarism. Okay. But here's the thing. Most plagiarism also occurs unwittingly. Viswanathan herself said she did it unwittingly because she had loved those. She claims that she had loved those books as a younger girl, and had kind of absorbed them into herself so much so that her claim was she had accidentally plagiarized it by repeating it word for word. Okay, a lot of people weren't buying it, but it is possible. Okay. So again, most plagiarism occurs unwittingly. Mainly, it happens because passages are copied directly from sources without any indication of being quoted. Okay. There's no punctuation. There's no signal phrasing. Many times, there's no citation. Okay. Patch writing. Again, we talked about patch writing. Okay. That's another accidental way that people plagiarize when they're trying to paraphrase. Another one is the failure to indicate the source of ideas or data integrated into their own words. If you are using information that you got from another source, you have to cite it. Okay, even if you're not intending to, if you don't cite it, you wind up plagiarizing. We don't want that happening to anybody. Okay. Less often was what you see is conscious plagiarism, which is commonly referred to as academic fraud. Okay. And there is a lot of stuff about academic fraud, especially if you go to certain universities. Okay, but conscious plagiarism would be things such as turning in a paper mill essay. There's still paper mills out there who will, if you give them a topic, they will find a saved paper to generate for you. Okay. And you can theoretically turn it in as yours. It's supposed to be for study purposes only, but a lot of people just copy paste the papers. That's why you get a lot of business for services such as turn it in. Okay. Someone who copies another student's essay. Okay. If you're copying somebody else's work, obviously that's plagiarism. You may think you're being clever by copying somebody who's not well published. But if it's something that can be attributed to someone else, it's still plagiarism. This also comes in play with copying your own essays. Okay, if you are copying an essay that you had written earlier, and using it as your new original work for a class, that is considered plagiarism. Okay. If you're copying chunks of text from sources without attribution, again, plagiarism. Okay. We don't want to be doing this. Okay. Absolutely not. And also fabricating data. If you are trying to come up with data that will support your argument, and instead of finding a resource that will give you that data, you wind up just literally pulling numbers out of your butt. Okay, fabricating data is going to be considered plagiarism. At the start, if you're going to avoid plagiarism, here's some techniques that you can use. At the start of an essay, read the class policy on plagiarism. Figure out what the actual policy is, what the penalties are. Okay, I'm fairly clear about my penalties for plagiarism. It's basically if you get caught, you get a 0. Okay, keep in mind that there are some colleges that go a little one step further than that. Now, Dallas College, it's my understanding, does not really have a academic honesty policy, okay, or an academic fraud policy. They leave it up to the professors to determine what to do, okay. Other colleges, not so lucky. Mostly private colleges, although some higher profile colleges, for sure, one I know for sure is the University of Michigan, will make you sign honor pledges, okay. And those honor pledges are basically contracts. You're signing a contract that says, I will present my own work. And if I am proven to have not presented my own work, you have the right to expel me. Okay. These are colleges where your penalty for committing academic fraud is expulsion. Okay. So let's just not do it. Okay. Another thing you can do at the start is pose a research question rather than a topic area. Okay. So that way you're not just searching for stuff in the topic and finding stuff that you can just copy paste and okay, call it a day. Okay. In this case, if you're posing a research question, that makes you actually have to read the stuff and integrate it into whatever answer you come up with for that research question. Okay. When you're at the note-taking stage, for sure, create a bibliographic entry for each source. Okay. Make sure you have all the information you need to create a proper bibliographical entry. Okay, the author name, the article name, the publisher, the publication name, the publisher, date of publication. Okay, if it's a website, you need a URL. Okay, all that stuff is going to help you properly create your Works Cited page. Copy passages into your journal word for word and include quotation marks. Do not just use photocopies, okay? That's too much temptation. Do the work, write out the quotes that you want to use, okay? Avoid patch writing in summaries or paraphrases, okay? Try not to just lift phrases, lift words from your original source to whatever it is you're writing. You have to make that paraphrase sound like you. Likewise, the summary should be in your own words. It should sound like you. Okay? Distinguish informational notes from personal exploratory notes. Yagelski recommends taking 3 columns. Okay? So column 1 is bibliographical information. Column 2 is the informational notes, what you're directly getting from the source. Column 3 is your personal exploratory notes, deciding whether that source is useful or not. Evaluating how you'll use it. Okay, keep those all separate. Okay. When you get into writing the draft, write entirely in your own words with the sole exception of quotations. Okay, don't try to copy how other people are writing. You can emulate a style, but don't just outright copy what they're saying. Okay, only with quotations. Otherwise, it has to be in your own words. Indicate all quotations properly. They should have quotation marks. They should have signal phrases. They should probably all have citations. Avoid patch writing when summarizing or paraphrasing. We talked about that already. Never cut and paste a website passage directly into a draft. Okay, I can't tell you how many people I've busted for plagiarism because they did this, and when they transferred the passage over, there was some kind of red flag. Okay, many times it's because they didn't bother to change the font, and once you copy paste something over, you can't change the font. Okay, another big red flag I have seen is people who have copied stuff with active hyperlinks. Okay, if you have active hyperlinks within your text, that's a huge red flag. Okay, use attributive tags and parenthetical citations within your paper. Okay, again, signal phrases. Who said this? Where are you getting it from? Okay. Cite all quotations, paraphrases, summaries, and any other references to other sources. Anytime you get something that you didn't already know and put it on the page, you need to cite it. Okay. Use in-text citations for all visuals. Okay. If you're doing multimedia and you're using visuals as part of your presentation, you need an in-text citation for where you got that visual from. Use in-text citations for all ideas and facts that are not common knowledge. Okay? So anything that is not attributable to everybody knows this, everybody's familiar with this, okay? Anything like that you need to have a citation for. Okay? That includes certain government documents. Okay? And I can't tell you how many times I've seen people citing these when they don't really need to. Okay? Things such as the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution of the United States. Okay, those are 3 documents that you do not need to cite, because at this point most educated people know what these documents say. Let's talk about citation as a bit of a transition here. What needs citations? Writers question all the time when citations are necessary in context with their work. As a general rule of thumb, any information that is not common knowledge should be cited. So that includes quotations, any paraphrased passage, any summarized passage or otherwise referred to passage, any image, diagram, chart, or table if you did not generate it yourself, any sound or video file used in a multimedia project, any idea, concept, or fact found from a source that is not common knowledge. Okay? So anytime you use information that you did not already know and not everybody already knows, you will need to cite it, no matter how you present it. If it's paraphrase, if it's a quotation, if it's a summary, if it is just some fact that you pulled and you integrated into your own text, doesn't matter. You need to have a citation for it. Now, citations are intended to work directly with works cited pages in formal academic essays. One should lead to the other. Citations give the reader a quick reference to the source, which can be used as a roadmap of sorts to the works cited page. Okay, so when you're citing your works in the paper, there has to be a direct relationship between the works you cite and the works listed in the works cited page. Okay. The works cited page is directly referenced by the citations. There's information from the citations which is obviously found in works cited listings. Okay, so your citations need to have some identifier. Okay, most times the citation is going to be an author name. Okay, or sometimes it's going to be a shortened title. Okay, if it's a short title of a publication, shortened title of a website, shortened title of an article. Okay. And then if it's a print source, you will also need page numbers. Okay, what page do you find this information on within that source? As a quick reference, your textbook packet for this class includes a guide to the MLA Style standards. They've been updated as of 2019. Okay, the best reference I can give you, though, especially for your computer, is going to be the Purdue OWL website. The owl.english.purdue.edu. Okay? Now, MLA formatting rules include not only works cited pages and citations, but also general layout standards for essays. Things such as spacing, pagination, author identification, so on and so forth. So it is thoroughly useful to a college writer. Now, for the purposes of what we're dealing with this week, I mainly want you to take a look at the MLA formatting rules for citations and for the works cited page. Okay? Now, I am going to give you a brief moment to do this. Okay? I am placing links directly to those pages on Purdue OWL in the the class PowerPoints link on eCampus. Okay, so you should be able to directly go to those pages to see what the standards are. I will have one link for citations, then I'll have one link for every page that tells you how to do a works cited listing. These are critical, okay, especially for this next this next team project that you're doing, because it's entirely a works cited page. Okay, so I'm going to give you approximately 10 minutes here. You can go ahead and pause me, and you can go check out those pages. Try to read up on what those formats are, so that you have a better knowledge of what you need to do. And it's also a good idea to keep those links handy, because you can always refer back to them. Okay, so give about 10 minutes, take a look at Purdue OWL, take a look at those standards.
Alright, we're back. So hopefully now you have a good grasp on how to do MLA formatted works cited pages and in-text citations. Okay? Let's move on to the next project. Now, granted, I know you're finishing up a project this week. I know you're doing proofreading and editing on your evaluation essay. Okay? We gotta try to keep the class moving along, so at the same time, I'm going to give you this assignment so that you guys can get started on with your teams. This is why we've had you guys working in teams. This is the main thing you're supposed to do with them. Okay? So make sure that you have your teams coordinated. Make sure you have contact information for all of them. Make sure that you can communicate with each other. Okay? So here is the annotated bibliography project. Okay? As a team,
You will be coordinating with each other to construct an annotated bibliography of the types usually called for in postgraduate work. Okay? That's typically when you would use a annotated bibliography, but we're teaching you how to do it now as a way of helping you with research. Okay? Annotated bibliographies are useful for writers as they provide a brief summary of the research source and its use within the paper in question. Okay? So, this is basically an assessment of how useful those sources are and how useful they're going to be. The annotations under each listing also give an evaluation based on the author's needs as to how reliable or useful a resource is. Okay, so not only are you giving the reliability and how you would use the source, you're also saying how useful it is directly to you. Okay, whether it'll be useful or not. Your team is going to create a resource list. Each individual member of the group will be responsible for writing their own copy of the annotated bibliography based on their own perspective on the subject. This is going to be a task where the team is going to have a general overarching subject that you're going to work with, but each individual member has their own interpretation. Okay? And that's how you're going to compose your annotated bibliography and how you're going to evaluate the sources based on everybody using the same list of sources. Okay? So here are the requirements for this essay. Okay? You will need to choose a topic from current events in the news as a group. Okay? So you guys are going to have to get together. You guys are going to have to talk over what general overarching topic you want to use. Okay? What kind of general topic area are you going to be working with, and then you're going to have to think about what perspective within that topic you want to take. Okay? And then you're going to collaborate on finding resources for that topic. This will also require the group to come up with a research question to focus your resource search. Okay? I am going to tell you this right now. Everybody's going to probably want to come up with their own research question rather than trying to shoehorn your opinion into your own research, into one overarching research question. So the teams are going to have a general topic, but then each individual member is going to come up with their own research question. Now, here's another thing about this. Okay. How do I put this? You need to choose a topic with a subtopic within your topic area that lends itself to proposals for improvement. Okay. Let me give you a big hint there because that's going to be important for the next essay. All right. So that's the general way you go to work with the topic. Second, collaboration is required for this assignment to work. Utilize your discussion board or whatever system you're using to coordinate during the week with the rest of your team. If you have contact with your teammates outside of eCampus, collaborate there as well. Okay, this would be social media, this would be email, Google Files, whatever, Google Cloud. Okay, however you're handling things with these workshops, it's probably gonna be the best way to do it. Okay, so as far as the annotations go, what the annotation is going to include is, again, a brief summary of each research source. So you have to show that you have read it, and you have to show that you understand what it is the author's trying to say. Okay, and then part of that annotation is also your assessment of that source, of whether it's reliable and whether it's useful. Okay, the formatting requirements for this assignment. You need to have MLA format for bibliographical information. Okay. So again, it's vitally important that you read up on the MLA format for a Works Cited page. Okay. You need to have alphabetical order based on the beginning of each listing. Follow MLA protocol for multiple sources from the same author. Okay. This is one thing that trips people up a lot, and it even trips people up on this assignment. Okay. Let me make it clear here. There is a certain format you need to use to follow for authors, okay, for these listings to determine alphabetical order. If you have a human author, it's going to start with their last name, okay? If you have a non-human author, most likely it's going to wind up starting with the title of the article, because most likely the author and the publisher are one and the same, okay? You do not format a non-human author's name the same way you format a human author's name. Okay? So I don't want to see anybody, if somebody, say, is doing anything involving the Census Bureau, I do not want anybody citing that work with the author name Bureau, comma, United States Census. Okay? That is not an MLA approved format. Right. As far as font face, should be 11 to 12 point font. Again, Times New Roman, Arial, or Calibri font faces. Should be double spaced. And there should be hanging indents used for the bibliographical listings and no indents for the annotations. Okay. Again, at Purdue OWL, it tells you what a hanging indent is and how you utilize it in your listings. Okay. Now, this assignment is going to be due November 13th. Okay, Friday the 13th. That's when it's due. This assignment will also act as the research basis for your proposal argument essay. So as you're gathering your research sources, focus your attention toward making a proposal for change. Okay, that's the main idea here that you want to use for your research questions. Okay, come up with some way that you can argue for change. Okay, and it has to be something that works within the topic that your team has chosen. Okay. And that's going to do it for this week. Okay, so you've got a daunting task ahead of you, but I know everybody in this class is capable of handling it. In the meantime, this week we are finishing up with the evaluation essays, so make sure you have posted your evaluation for proofreading. Okay, the link to turn it in is going to open up on Thursday. In the meantime, also work on MindTap, also work on the weekly discussion boards. Okay. With all that said and done, I will be seeing you guys next week.